Okay, hi. So I am going to talk to you about understanding behavior today. Because I don't understand it, I study it. That's the bottom line. Everything that you do in mobile health or in any kind of healthcare comes back to behavior, be it the behavior of the doctor, the behavior of the patient, the behavior of somebody who you're trying to keep well, a person. And what are the influences of behavior? So emotion influences behavior, such as fear and desire. Cognitions, what you think. Your personal characteristics, sometimes gender, ethnicity, age. Social environment, what people do is a huge influence on behavior. What other people do. Your natural and built environment influences your behavior, the access that you have to particular things. The institutions that you work in. The economy, the social economic status. How many of you were on the phone to your stock people this morning as the, yeah. That's going to influence my purchasing behavior for a while. Your own behavior influences your next behaviors. So if you had a big breakfast this morning, you're not starving. But if you were like me and did not have a big breakfast, you're going to have a big lunch. It's going to influence previous behavior, and habits are a big influence on behaviors. And of course, your genes and your own metabolic health influences your behavior. There are many, many theories of behavior. This book, for instance, from Susan Michie, identifies about 83 of them. I'm not going to go over all of those today. No. But I want to give you a bit of Behavior 101. This is going to seem, for many of you, like stuff that you've known forever, but I just want to take you back for a moment. What is a theory? It's a bunch of formalized concepts that's meant to explain and predict behavior, and it's sometimes called a conceptual model. And we are leaving the age of conceptual models and moving into the age of computational models. These are empirical, quantifiable, testable, and these are sometimes called mathematical or statistical. What we can do with this data that we're now getting in from these new technologies is we can model behavior much more precisely than we used to be able to do, and more dynamically. And that's going to help you think about the behaviors that you're going to want to change in your groups and in all of your mobile health efforts. So theories are built of constructs. These are like intelligence is a construct. Motivation is a construct. They are not directly measurable. And a variable is what we measure. So some are immediately observable, like my age is measurable. But some are made measurable, like intelligence is often operationalized with the idea of an IQ test. Many of the things that you do with your algorithms and your questionnaires and your EMA is making these invisible constructs visible as variables. So keep that in mind. There are a lot of controversies around what a variable is. And I think that's going to get even bigger as we move forward in mobile health, right? Because we can think of so many more ways of measuring things. My favorite on this, along these lines, something very accessible, is that we used to give people, how many of you are engaged at all in gaming? Not many, all right. Well, so you know that you want people to be engaged in a game, right? And we used to measure that by giving them a questionnaire, until an engineer woke up in the middle of the night and thought, I've got all this data on the back end that I'm throwing away. How many times they've clicked on it, how long they've stayed on that site. I've got a measure of engagement. And then, of course, there's the psychologist saying, yeah, but that doesn't really measure engagement. I mean, so I think as we develop new algorithms and find new variables in our data, there are going to be a lot of controversies around this. Okay, so what is a theory? What is a model? I'm going to give you a couple to play with, but what you can do is use your common sense in your groups, okay? So here's one of my two favorite ones, and this is the idea that there are two processes by which you can change behavior. One of them is the sensory process that also drives behavior, and one of them is the conscious irrational process. So one is an immediate knee-jerk reaction, and the other is something that I think about. Right? So the question is, can I make somebody think about a behavior and decide? So first, I smell the French fries. I smell the French fries. I love French fries. I smell, yeah. I smell the French fries. And then I can either immediately and automatically buy them, which is probably what's going to happen, especially if I'm in Belgium. And or I can think, Donna, you just got down to 133. That's your favorite weight. don't have the French fries. And how, your question for somebody who shouldn't have the French fries is, how do I get them to make that conscious, how do I not knee-jerk them? And good luck if it's me. But that's one way of thinking about behavior. And like I said, there are at least 83. This was from Misha. Here's another one of my favorite, and that's the theories of self-determination theory. And this says that feeling of autonomy or control and of support, feeling competent, and being able to self-regulate, having a strong ability to self-regulate. So this autonomy and this idea of support and choice feeds into being able to self-regulate my behavior and feeds into my competence, which also feeds into self-regulation. And then this all feeds into being able to change behavior and maintain that behavior change. Another thought. So this new means for continuous behavioral and physiological monitoring, a momentary self-report through wearables, deployables, invisibles, chemical sensing, digital breadcrumbs, and your smartphone, which is this is a more powerful computer than I had when I was running the psych department in Amsterdam, although those many years ago. This is more powerful than the mainframe we had. And you're like, got one in your pockets. This is allowing us to think about behavior dynamically in real time and in context. And this kind of model doesn't get at that, right? Can we move? Yeah. So a dynamic model takes into account momentary and longitudinal changes in relationships between constructs. It also, as Vivek was talking about, looks at within-person fluctuations. It's very ideographic. What's happening to that one person? And it looks at the influence of shifting contexts on this. So for instance, let's look at perceived competence. You have a boosting event in the morning. Let's say you have a very healthy breakfast and you're feeling so confident. Oh my gosh, I did not have the donut. It's great. So my perceived competence is up, and then my ability to self-regulate is also up. However, that effect decays as I go to work, and it's all going down. And then I have a fight with my boss, depressing event. My perceived competence goes way down, and as I walk out of the room, my self-regulation is down, and that donut is going to happen. Right? And then, I remember stuff. You never know what's going to influence in this sort of loopy, repetitive way my ability to self-regulate. But y'all, with these new technologies, have the ability to not only to measure that, to see that loopy process happen in real time, but you also have the ability to intervene when it is most needed, at that moment, because you can know it, because you can know that it's happening. So that just-in-time adaptive intervention, that is where we're going. This is a dynamic behavioral model based on the social cognitive theory. Doesn't that look just like a horrendogram? This is Daniel Rivera's work, but it's not a horrendogram. What it tells you is that if this is like a little water tub, and it tells you, through the day, self-efficacy, if that's a full tub, then that's going to influence my behavior positively, and if it's an empty tub, then my behavior is going to go down. So it's really just a feedback loop. But this is one of the many ways we're beginning to look at behavior change. And although my name is first on this article, this is really Rivera's work. Just saying. So, key questions. I'm going to use the example of obesity because you might have guessed that's my area of research. Hi, David. So you have to decide, you're going to get a broad topic. So obesity is going to be my broad topic. But then I have to decide what behaviors I'm going to intervene on, right? And I'm going to have to talk about which populations to study. Because if I'm studying a Hispanic population or an African-American population, this is two very different diets, two very different needs, two very different cultures. So you need to know. You can't conquer the world. Well, you can, but you have to do it one population at a time. If you're going to be working with very young kids, that's a whole different intervention than working with kids in high school. Believe me, I've had that failure before. So these behaviors and determinants that you're going to be thinking about. So I forget what I do on the next slide, but like obesity, let's say we're going to talk about sugar consumption. It's going to differ by culture and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, urban versus rural, age, cognitive development, health status. If somebody's diabetic, your intervention is going to be very different than if they're not. So then you have, so you're chosen, if your chosen outcome is obesity, what are the related behaviors? For obesity, we're looking at diet, physical activity, sedentariness, sleep, and stress. These are the main ones. You have to know which behaviors are related and then choose your battles. And then you have to think about which determinants are related to the behaviors. And this goes back to the idea of theory. So let's say social cognitive theory, perceived competence, and let's say we're intervening on eating chocolate because we're intervening on me. And then that's going to lead to obesity. So how are you going to build your intervention to, for instance, boost perceived competence? How are you going to do that using new technologies? You can do it at the moment that perceived competence is going down, because there are ways of sensing and asking the right questions and learning. So these algorithms learn about the person as you go, so that you'll understand the patterns, know when to intervene and where, what time and what context they need you, and eventually what you need to do. So pare it down, which constructs, behavior, outcomes to intervene on, and that is going to determine what you measure, right? So if we decide that we're going to intervene on sugar intake, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to measure sleep. We might need to measure physical activity, because it might be so that the more active I am, the more sugar I eat. So you have to think about what you're intervening on, what you have to measure, and how to measure it. And there is a very important place for transdisciplinary collaboration in all of this. The timing, frequency, and context of the measurement is very important. So how often do I need to measure stress over a day, let's say? When do I need to measure diet? When do I need to measure, and how often do I need to measure all of these things? What is the balance between participant burden, because I could beep you on your phone every 10 minutes for the rest of your life. So are you going to answer that? Yeah, no. So what is the trade-off between participant burden and data needs? How good is good enough? Which technologies do you want to use? So everybody's so enamored of all these sensors that get ubiquitous data. And I'm going to tell you, I too am enamored. I have technojoy. However, some things you just have to ask, like, how are you feeling? There are measures of stress, which I'm sure Santosh will tell you a lot about. They correlate maybe 40.45 with actual perceived stress. So there's different things going on. What do you want to know, and how are you going to get that data? Where can you measure ubiquitously? I think I just answered that question. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places you can. So sometimes I just need to know how much physical activity you're getting, not necessarily context, ubiquitous. Sometimes I need to know how much end context. I can probably do that with GPS too. But if I need to know your perceived context, not I am at 425 East 30th Street, but I am at my best friend's house, then I might need to ask at least once. What do you want on demand? So when do you want to beat people and ask them questions? And what do you want ubiquitously? Why and where? Think about it. And which measures are you going to use? We don't have a lot of validated measures for this, so you have to think very carefully about how to do that and get an expert on your team that can help you. What's good enough? Do I need exact measures of everything, or is my high heel getting in my way? What is the role of more traditional measures? Let's not forget that we can still use baseline questionnaires that can be very useful to inform our mobile technologies as we develop them. So here's an example. If I want to get salivary cortisol from kids, salivary cortisol is a nice measure of stress. If I want to get that measure from kids, we decided that if we had a waking measure, a 30-minute measure, and an evening measure, this would be Diana, this would be enough. Now, it's very time sensitive. If you don't get the cortisol as soon as they wake up, before they get out of bed, basically, then your day is shot. It's not a good measure. So this is the what and when. We gave them 3 colored vials for waking, 30 minutes, and evening. We gave them an app called Zemi, which means oracle, on a phone that woke them up and timed them. We then had them take a picture of the vial with the salivette in it so that we knew that they'd actually done it, or could guess that they had, and that is, of course, time-stamped. And then we asked them some theoretical questions, how they were feeling, a couple of theory questions, very quick. And then we gave them some open area to respond. If they said they were feeling very stressed, we asked them why, to keep them engaged. So that's an example. Now, who would use this kind of expertise? Engineers, computer scientists, serious game developers. People use my expertise if they're modelers, trying to build new models of behavior. I am not a modeler. This will come as a great surprise to you, but I don't know how to use control systems modeling, machine learning. I need somebody like Jim Regg or Mani to help me with that. But to build those models of behavior, we need to work together. What is that data? What does it mean? What's important here? Physicians trying to get paper to adhere to treatment also need to understand behavior. Public health researchers, interventionists. And why should researchers work with experts like me? These are templates. I have to answer these questions. Wendy made me. It feels a little weird. I said, this is why you need me. This feels really weird. Okay, but here's why. New technologies by themselves are not magics. They're just gadgets. You need my help, and I need your help. We need to work together to develop best practices in development, design, and deployment. Technology can add to fundamental knowledge on behavior, and behavior can add to fundamental knowledge increase on technology. If we don't do that together, we just have toys. And that's one of the reasons Wendy started this mHealth training in 2011, is because we had a lot of toys. Theory and models drive which behaviors to measure. I can help you with best measures, understanding mechanisms of behavior change, and I've got expertise in specific populations, targeting and tailoring. This is really embarrassing. And I can help you to motivate people to give you their data. Okay, I'm done with that slide. How's my time? So I have a case study. This is Know Me Networks. You guys have heard me talk about this. For those who know me a million times, it was back in the day, 2008, a suite of mobile, Bluetooth-enabled wireless wearable sensors. They interfaced with a mobile phone and a secure server, processed data in real time, and it was designed specifically for use in overweight minority youth. And the whole idea, this is what their phone face looked at, and the whole idea is these kids get less than 10 minutes of physical activity a day. I kid you not. And the whole idea was, this is a sedentary meter. This, after school and in the weekends, this tracks your sedentary time. When you get to 2 hours, we are going to beep you. We're watching you on the back end. You've got a watcher. You can reset this if you get 10 minutes of physical activity. It doesn't have to be contiguous, consecutive. Any 10 minutes within that 2-hour period will reset the dial. Got it? And other fabulous things. And we can see this on the back end. Here's what I'm talking about with how theory and evidence can guide your interventions. So these are our decisions. These are the needs you have. These are the things you have to think about. One of the big things, the decision point, is when do we intervene in real time? At the time, see, now it would be every 30 minutes, right? Because now the evidence says 30 minutes of sitting is a no-no. But back in the day, it was 2 hours. So this was based on evidence. And how did we measure that? Through sensors and personal algorithms so that we knew when the kids were sedentary, and through time, right? Those are how we measured that. How did we tailor this to match the kid, right? Because we're working with kids in the field in their daily life. We knew where the child was and the access that they had in their homes or in their neighborhoods through a down-to-earth, regular intake at the beginning of the intervention. So we knew a lot about these kids so that we wouldn't tell Johnny to go out at 6 o'clock or dark to the park near him and get shot if we knew that he was living in a dangerous area. So we knew a lot about these kids. We knew if they had stairs. We knew if they had soup cans that they could do for weightlifting. We'd given them straps. And how did we give these messages? Using the self-determination theory, everybody that was on the back end talking to these kids, because it was all via text, was trained in motivational interviewing and to use self-determination theory. So what was the measurement modality? The detailed intake, the text messages, and the watcher utterances. So we didn't use a questionnaire on the kids to measure if their confidence rose. In hindsight, I would have liked to have done that. So What we did see is, was that utterance from the watcher coherent to the idea of raising self-confidence or not? That's how we measured that. So a decision rule for how, if we're going to keep on with this intervention, once we beep you, you've been sedentary for 2 hours, the decision rule on whether or not to continue that intervention was child availability. And the basis of this decision rule was common sense, which I hope you guys are using because we need that. And we knew if the kid was available via text message. For instance, beep you, you've been sedentary for 2 hours. And Alicia writes back, yeah, well, I'm at my grandmother's having dinner. I can't come out and play right now. Okay, sorry, we'll reset. True story. We reset. 10 minutes later, Alicia, I'm really bored. What are you doing? So we got her to get up and help grandma clear the table, right? It's very funny. They loved having us around. So intervention options, these days you would have many more intervention options that you could branch into, and I'm sure Susan will talk some about that. But we just had one, and that was motivational interviewing. And we intervened on competence, connectedness, and autonomy. And we scored this after the fact by the watcher's utterances. And the proximal outcome was reduction in sedentary time, and how we measured that with sensors and algorithms. Anyway, you get the idea of the sort of grid that you need to make as you go through developing your interventions. Just FYI, we reduced sedentary behavior by like 208 minutes in a weekend, which is huge for these kids. The question is, was it the novelty or did the prompts matter? So after 10 minutes after a prompt, physical activity was higher than 10 minutes not after a prompt. So yes. And did the theory matter? Because that's, of course, what I'm standing here talking about. And the answer was yes. This was housekeeping messages and that long discussion about, yes, I'm at my grandmother's. So that's the neutral messages. Most important thing for you guys to notice is that the affirmation messages and prompting questions were adherent to this self-determination theory and motivational interviewing training. But these were humans behind the scenes, and every once in a while they couldn't resist just telling kids what to do. Why don't you X, Y, Z? And we found out, this is earth-shattering science. Are you ready? Kids don't like to be told what to do. Okay, I've got proof. But theory really did matter. All right, and this is me. Ah! There should be one more thing, but there's not. It says stay in touch, but I don't have it. Anyway.